Chapter 41. Liberation Day 5 Kali. In order to make her visitor comfortable, she could have used her mystrionic abilities to reduce the temperature and protect herself from the cold, but since he was out here on business, the walk-in freezer desperately needed to be serviced. And he was being paid for his time. She set him to work on the freezer once he was done servicing her. His real name was Dimitri. Zagal team have the most advanced cooling technology in Corrales, which seemed only natural, given the frigid climates they lived in. He could be a good resource. His team included a half-dozen Zagal team who oversaw the Elysians, who were able to work in warmer temperatures. He could handle temperatures up to the mid-60s but was progressively less comfortable as the temperature raised past the 40-degree mark. Contrary to most subterrans, he became more erect, and a bit larger as the temperature dropped. He enthusiastically finished what he started this time. He clearly wanted more from her, but that had more to do with him not having a girlfriend than any actual attraction. Once she got used to the temperature differences, it was fun, but that's all it could be. Sex was one thing, but cuddling was definitely out of the question. She wouldn't mind being his racy lady friend to help stave off the loneliness, or maybe an occasional fun fling when he was in the area and she was in just the right mood, but if he was looking for more, he was tugging on the wrong tail, as Ojarin would say. Dimitri's team was scheduled to leave for another location in a few days. She agreed to see him at least one more time before he went. Next time she'd make sure to dress for the occasion. He was there for an hour and a half in total, and would have an interesting story to bring back to the ship with him. Despite all her countermeasures, she was chilled to the bone. After tossing on her robe and escorting him out, she headed up to the penthouse to take a long warm bath to bring up her core temperature. She really wished Bruno was here. A warm body with all that fur would be nice right now. She wondered if they sold insertable heating pads. Then again, this was Kaylani space. They probably had an assortment for sale at the toy box. I wonder what Strawberry meant by late, Kali complained to herself. She knows I'm still on Galactic Standard Time. The sun won't set until sometime tomorrow. I don't like this. Days are so long here. There's some assassin in town and Ojarin's away. If something happens to her this time, who's left to help? Kali climbed out of the tub and pulled warm air around herself to dry off, grabbing onto the faucet to prevent building up an electric charge. She'll be fine, Kali reassured herself. I'm her friend, not her mother. She looked through her dresser and decided to wear her sarong black furred bikini top and fox mask. It was the same outfit she'd worn to club night with Syntholo, Nelfrey and Kiryu. That seemed like a lifetime ago. That was the night her Cayman friend gave her this mask. It was cracked now, but it still fit. I should call them, Kali sighed. She was able to tie the top easily, but she just couldn't get the sarong to lay right. She called over to Tudafuta hoping Trudy could help her. She had a lot of local contacts. Hopefully her schedule wasn't too full today. They were closed. Kali left a message explaining her dilemma, and asked her if she knew anyone who could help. She gave up on the sarong and carried it back down to the bar area. Just wrapping it around her waist was uncomfortable, restricted her tail movement, and made it look like she had something sticking out of her butt. Her tails were arranged in a triangular pattern with her black tail on top. It was physically impossible for them to lay completely flat. She received a notification of an incoming call from an unknown sender. She ran her finger down her earpiece to answer. Hello, Kali asked. Tell me where you want to meet, the voice on the other side of the line said. It might be Trudy, but she was unsure. They sounded harried. Kali directed them to the hotel. I'll be right there, they said, then abruptly disconnected. She wrapped the sarong loosely around her waist and waited by the front desk. There was a knock at the door roughly 20 minutes later. It was Trudy. She was wearing a light gray tube top with straps, and a pair of calf-length pants of a style Kali wasn't familiar with. They looked flexible and comfortable, with exception of the bulge that disrupted the otherwise feminine aesthetic. Kali rushed over to open the doors for her. Hey gorgeous, Trudy said as she walked past her. I don't mind stopping by on my day off to tie you up this time. You're helping me tomorrow, the least I can do is reciprocate tonight, right? Kali was confused. We're still on for tomorrow, right? Trudy asked. What's tomorrow? Kali asked nervously. You're my date to the Flesh Row Vendors Conference, Trudy said slowly. Have you changed your mind or? Tomorrow, Kali said in dismay. I thought I had 4 more days. It's tomorrow night, Trudy said firmly. Wait, tomorrow night local time? Of course, Trudy scoffed. I'm still on Galactic Standard Time, Kali said with relief. I was worried for a few minutes. I'll be there. I already have a dress set aside. Damn it, Ojarin was sent on some mission. It's 2 jump days from here. He won't be back in time to take me. I'll have to make other arrangements to get there. You can ride with me, Trudy teased as she took the sarong from Kali and started fastening it around her black tail. That way I can make sure you don't stand me up. A local day is 2.3 Galactic Standard Days, which is 30 hours based on jump space travel distance. If I didn't stick to Galactic Standard Time, I wouldn't have any idea when people will be where. Kali shrugged as Trudy carefully guided her tails into position. I've lived here for years and never stopped to think of it. Trudy started then paused while Kali coiled up her brown tails to be tied next to her hips. I just realized one day on Erosha is 69 hours based on the Galactic Standard Clock, Trudy said while tying the last knot. About the conference, Kali asked with mild trepidation, is there anything you need me to do while I'm there? Bluntly put, Trudy said as she stood back up, looked her in the eye and smiled, you're my arm candy for the night. Oh, is that all? Kali giggled. I heard rumors someone finally bought this property, Trudy said while walking around the lobby. I guess that was you. Have you decided what you're going to do with it yet? It's actually in Bruno's name, Kali rolled her eyes. I'm not a citizen, he is. Mind if I take a look around? Trudy asked. Mind if I come along? Kali smiled. It's your hotel, Trudy laughed as they started walking. Over the course of exploring the public areas, Trudy had a lot of input and some great ideas. In addition to the pool and spa areas, there were 2 bar areas, a restaurant, a ballroom, and an area that would serve well for conventions. This could work well with the concept of offering housing and opportunities for people who needed a hand up. They could help familiarize stranded visitors with the local customs and make workers available to help with emergency personnel shortages, as well as offering positions as hotel staff. The convention hall, as Trudy kept calling it, could be used to host job recruiting fairs. They spent a few hours discussing the hotel before returning to the lobby. Trudy, you haven't been as flirtatious as you normally are, Kali observed. Is something wrong? It's my day off, she chuckled. Don't worry. I'll be in my work persona when I pick you up for our conference date. You don't have to, Kali said. I'm not sure they'd recognize me if I didn't, Trudy grinned. It's a game we all play. We're professionals. We must be able to turn on that charm like a switch every time someone steps through that door. We may not have patrons at the convention, but we're a lot more competitive. Large or small, we're all business owners. We all shut down for a full day local time, of course. The low-end shops get an income boost until we open back up. Before you go, Kali said as Trudy started for the door, can I ask you for a little advice? What do you need, hun? Trudy asked. I had a guy by here earlier. He's really cold, Kali started, then redirected in response to Trudy's surface thoughts. No, I mean physically. He's a lesion. Do you know if there's a better way to warm up afterwards? I told him I'd try to see him again before he leaves the system. An Elysian? We don't see many of them in these parts. I'd have to ask around, Trudy shrugged. Yeah, I mentioned I met him at an event at NIM to a friend, Kali blushed, and they asked the company to send him on a tech call. Trudy looked like she was trying not to laugh. What? 2 more classes like that last one and I can get you licensed as a sex worker, she said with a faint smile. Then you can charge him for the visit. I'm still in the market for an assistant. Enjoy the rest of your day off, Kali said while shaking her head slowly. I will, Trudy said while opening the doors. What would you have done if I said yes? Kali asked just to see how she'd answer. I'd have to introduce you differently at the convention, Trudy said as the doors closed behind her. I'm still not shaving one of my tails, Kali said to herself as Trudy walked away. Well, maybe if Cyan asked her to, but there was no chance of that. She certainly didn't need the money, but couldn't help but wonder how much someone would offer to spend a night with her. She spent a few minutes planning her day before heading out. Just in this one city there were so many attractions, so why did she keep being drawn back to Flesh Row, and the diner across the street from Confectioner's Row? She didn't have any interest in the theme parks, not alone at least. Some things are just more fun with friends. Catching a play was more Nelfree or Syntholo's style. She would rather get a few recommendations before looking into that. The colleges and universities offered individual classes, but that involved a time commitment and sitting around. She decided to start her day with a walk through the flower gardens, then head to the commercial arts district to see if anything caught her eye. The walls of the hotel were sparsely decorated, but you could still see the outlines of where paintings had once been. Hopefully one of the dance studios would be willing to let her sit in on a class around lunchtime. Bruno was scheduled for a 10-hour security shift. Hopefully he'd be willing to meet her at that dockside restaurant for another bowl of glass noodles when he got off. She took care to stay clear of the sprawling temple complex. It took a few days living at the hotel for it to really sink in, but she wasn't a prisoner anymore. It was time to start enjoying that freedom, even if she still didn't trust sending messages through the uplink satellites. Regardless of Maze's response to her circumstances, she didn't trust Vorshana to fire Jax. He worked for Gamaro, not Kaylani, and could still have been stationed on the southern continent. While sitting by the fountain in the gardens, she opened a message to Tyrell hoping to arrange a secure call with the twins. The reply caught her off guard. He said he'd get back to her when he wasn't busy and said something about their sister. Since when did the twins have a sister? He forwarded her someone's contact information and told her to route any further messages through them, and not interrupt him again. He went offline immediately after transmitting the message. She wasn't about to trust that until Cho had time to look it over, which wouldn't be until whenever late was. Kali sighed heavily as she got up and made her way toward the commercial arts district. It quickly became apparent to her that she didn't have an eye for art. Either she had sex on the brain or the still lives looked pornographic to her, and the majority of the others looked like chemical spills. In fairness, the artist may have been from a species that saw a radically different color spectrum, or was maybe completely blind. She always wondered how everything appeared to a Kimseti who perceived the world with a form of sonar. She spent a while standing in front of a painting which consisted of wavering bordered silhouettes on a photographic background. There was something haunting about the image. She decided to order a print before leaving the gallery and taking one more look at the sidewalk stalls. Halfway down the street, another painting caught her eye. This one was still on the easel. The character in the foreground was complete, but they were still working on filling the empty space in the background. The artist was there working on it. She waited for him to finish sketching out the scene before interrupting him. The opposing cliffside should be higher, Kali smiled. The artist muttered something under his breath without turning. He was a member of one of the canine species. What do you plan on calling it? Promised vengeance, he grumbled irritably while keeping his back to her. It's not done yet. No, not yet. Still working on it. I'm trying to, he growled. You're pretty focused on your subject, Kali said, trying desperately not to laugh. He lowered his head and put down his brush. You have the stripes wrong. They're two-tone like this, Kali said as she stuck out her leg. What's your problem? He said angrily, finally turning to face her. He sat silently, staring at her, and blinked twice. Hello, Kali smiled. I'm Lady Darkseid. She shook his hand with her black tail, then lowered it behind her back. He stood there slack-jawed for a moment before responding. I spent weeks going over that video. I thought that was just a shadow or afterimage. I'll have to start over. Please don't, Kali giggled. If you don't approve. Actually, I'd like to buy it as it is. But it's not done, he objected. Neither is my search for that ship, Kali scowled. Until then, it's an empty promise. Would you mind doing a sitting for me sometime? He asked. Just so I can make sure I get everything right in the next edition. Sure, Kali shrugged. I'll give you my contact information so we can set up a time. He thanked her profusely and sold her the unfinished painting. His name was Valho. He promised to deliver it personally once the paint had dried. She took a picture of him to add to his contact information. She was pretty sure he was Cayman, but sending a copy to Kiryu to confirm wasn't a bad idea. His fur was mostly black. He had a white stripe on his tail and snout which she was pretty sure was dyed. His chin-length white hair looked like it belonged on a Terran's head. It was likely an augmentation, but she didn't bother to ask. Finding a dance studio that didn't mind letting her sit in was easier than she expected. She was interested in taking a few classes and let them know she was trying to decide what style was right for her, to make it easier to slip out after a few minutes. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, which made it near impossible to find before Bruno's shift ended. She ended up signing up for weekly classes with a Shega teacher. It was a long walk to the docks, so she got a head start and arranged to meet him there. As she walked down the road toward the wharf, she felt a faint mental tug. It wasn't telepathic or psionic in nature. She refocused her eyes, but there was nothing to see. It was just the thoughts of a random person that were so mournful, so desperate, that they couldn't be ignored or denied. It was like a silent prayer to some non-existent god. If she aided them in any way, they'd likely attribute it to some sort of divine intervention. But at least they'd cease their endless chanted pleas. The thoughts kept rapidly growing louder or softer, periodically maintaining a more consistent level. Were they being driven around town? She sat by the side of the road, closed her eyes, and reached out with her mind to try and pinpoint their location. They were on the move. Her conscious awareness shifted as Bruno's thoughts turned to her. He was just getting off work. Why did I teach him how to draw my attention? Kali muttered to herself. She reined in her search, narrowing her focus. It didn't take long to find the mind she was seeking. 2 other entities were nearby. She gently listened to their surface thoughts to get a feel for what was happening. The desperate thoughts could be from some criminal as easily as the victim of some crime. Indigent patrol, Kali smirked. It was the reason Cho and Ojaran wanted her to take control of the hotel in the first place and could explain why their thoughts had drawn her attention through all the background noise. She urged the driver toward the bridge she was sitting near and looked up the god they were praying to while making her way across. Hanuman, the son of Pawan, the Hindu god of wind? They must be a samsaran. Usually depicted as a money-faced man with a long tail. She wasn't sure if she should intervene. Could help promote the notion of a Sheeler divinity. If they mistook her for some monkey-faced man, she'd have to take offense, but according to what she had read, worshippers saw him as a liberator. Did that make it better or worse? Then again, at least they weren't a worshipper of Kaylani. Kali held up her hand to signal the driver as the APC crossed the bridge. Ma'am, the driver said after slowing the car and sliding open the window. He was Lupian, wearing a thick coat with a patch featuring a sliver with a paw print in the middle. It was the insignia of Paklaru. He wasn't Fellowship or even Kaylani. He was a subcontractor. Ojeran had mentioned them to her, but had left her with the impression that they worked mostly on the star docks inspecting cargo. Planetary security must be short-staffed. Kali took solace in the knowledge Ojeran would have enough company on his mission to merit a staff shortage. I'd like to have a few words with your passenger, Kali said forcefully. He looked over at the Lupian sitting in the seat beside him who shrugged. No, Kali crossed her arms, motioned to the back with her black tail, in there. That's no passenger. He's a dangerous prisoner that is scheduled to be sent to the southern continent, the driver insisted. Dangerous enough to drive all round town making regular stops? Kali mocked. The second Lupian made a rumbling noise deep in its throat. Kali had picked up enough of the bestial trade language to understand a few common phrases. His accent was really thick, but she got the gist of it. Go ahead and scan it, she said while holding out her arm. The accented Lupian growled something. Not here, the driver paraphrased. Meet us on the other side of bridge. Kali smiled to herself, knowing full well what he'd meant. It was a reference to an old Lupian parable. In the story, the bridge broke and sank after a quarrel, making it impossible to reach the other side. The driver started sliding the window shut. So you want me to break the bridge? Kali grinned. Who should I bill the repair cost to? The driver slammed the APC into park, flung the door open and stepped out, drawing his sidearm. Instead of stepping outside, the other Lupian turned to his side and took aim with his rifle. I'm not on the valid target list anymore, Kali rolled her eyes. We both know those things are useless without a trigger code. Just check my ID before this becomes a major incident. You're Lupian. You should be able to see my aura. I don't have to bluff. The second Lupian scooted over toward the door. The driver scanned her ID chip. Open the back, the other Lupian said from inside the cab. Apparently the driver was the subordinate. She waited while they opened up the containment area, which held two people, both of which were bound with magnetic forearm cuffs. One of them was a middle-aged Samsaran man. The other was a blonde sham Farian of indeterminate gender. The security personnel's surface thoughts revealed the reason behind their reluctance. They received a 100 credit commission for each person they sent over to the Gamaro Inc. facility on the southern continent. These people were being treated like criminals and being sent to become wage slaves because their captors were more interested in making a few credits than doing their job properly. Quiet, Kali ordered in response to their captives' desperate pleas. While female Samsaran were renowned for their beauty, Kali was never impressed by the men. The male was not alone. His woman escaped. We're still trying to locate her, the subordinate Lupian growled. His visitor's pass has expired. He's here illegally. The echelon system is still under quarantine, Kali sneered. He and his family can't go home. He's a refugee. Kali sent an information request to Navari's office. The man said something about running out of money, but fell silent as Kali glared at him for interrupting. They are criminals and it's the law, the Lupian subordinate said with a note of finality. Is it just you and what is she? Your wife, daughter? I do not know this person, the man said angrily, motioning at the other prisoner. You've been quiet, Kali said, turning her attention to the blonde. What's your story? They shrugged, looking thoroughly defeated. Do you mind cleaning? Cleaning what? The blonde grumbled. I recently bought a hotel. I still need to hire staff. The Samsaran man cut in, belittling the blonde while extolling the work ethic of his family. Kali stepped back and looked at the lead Lupian. Wait here while I check something. He agreed, but clearly wasn't happy about it. Second car pulled up behind them. A Shayga and an Udbar wearing Kaylani colors stepped out. The Lupians didn't seem too happy about it. It didn't take long to get the refugees' situation sorted out. Arrangements would be made for the Samsaran and his family to be sent to a farming colony in the Setter system until the refugee crisis was over, at which time they'd be shipped back to their home system. The condition was that they help tend the fields. The blonde was a bit more challenging. Bruno was officially the hotel's owner. She couldn't issue a work permit without his approval, making red tape her most formidable opponent. He could give her and Sato Cho or whoever that authority, but the forms needed to be on record. After sending off the Lupians to the community services office to get the Samsaran situation sorted, the second car took custody of the blonde, while Kali filled out the paperwork needed to file a conditional work permit. The work validation form had to be filed by the end of the following business day or Kali would have to pay a hefty fine. When she was about halfway through the paperwork, Bruno came clomping across the bridge, rendering all her work pointless. The blonde left the sex and gender line blank. As soon as their chip was updated with their new work status, Bruno, Cully, and their new employee Jamie continued on their quest for noodles. Section break. It was a slow day at the restaurant. There was plenty of available seating. Bruno chose a booth near the windows. Jamie was wearing a zip-front hoodie with a fur-lined hood and straight-leg jeans. They were about 5'3", slender with soft features, narrow arms and short blonde hair, hazel eyes and fair skin. They were soft-spoken and would most likely be considered an alto if they were singing. It annoyed Cully that she couldn't tell if they were a boy or girl. She just didn't know how to refer to them, and when asked, Jamie's reply wasn't any help. "I'm not a commodity?" What was that supposed to mean? They looked more feminine than masculine, but without digging through their psyche there was no way to be sure. Their surface thoughts weren't revealing anything. Bruno wasn't flirting around them. Maybe he sensed something she didn't. "We should discuss your duties and pay," Bruno said to Jamie after ordering everyone another bowl. "Lady Darkseid said I'd be working with the cleaning crew at some hotel," Jamie said. "Please just call me Cully," she snickered. "At least when there aren't any Samsar and religious nuts around." Bruno chuckled. "There is no crew. Jamie is first. Maybe you find more. You survive this world how?" Jamie didn't answer. Bruno continued. "I was found alone on ship. I was the only one alive. Friend Sato became kitty after sleep with men for place to sleep. Cully was government captive for weeks. Ojeran comes here to try to make difference for little people. Not much money, but we offer you freedom and your choice of room. We have many rooms. If you can help us find more that help us and it help you. Sound good? So what does Jamie do?" "Are you asking me to help you get people off the street?" Jamie asked. "Only good ones," Bruno smiled broadly. "We have 150 rooms," Cully said. "Someone who can help us fill them would be great, but if you can't, that's fine. The more you're able to do, the more I'll pay you. It's that simple. I don't want to own a hotel full of people. We want to build a community that can help the people discarded by Kaylani society. Right now, most of them are swallowed up by Gamaro Inc. I want to change that." Jamie looked back and forth from Cully to Bruno. "We share our story and our want." Bruno smiled. "It's your turn, Jamie." "I don't." Jamie started. "We all live in the penthouse but have our own rooms on other floors," Cully interrupted. "You'll be expected to keep your area clean. Anything you do beyond that is up to you and it will earn you a few credits. I already know your necklace. I have a few and I'm a telepath. Bruno may be big but he's not my muscle. He just wants to understand your survival strategy." "I work security at NIM," Bruno explained. "It is my job to watch people. Do I have to run background and watch you too?" "Fine," Jamie sighed. "I'll tell you. I haven't been here long, just a few months. The boutique I worked at was talking about opening a Kaylani branch. I was one of the people chosen for the position. I took all the required courses, consent regulations, service expectations and practices, all that. That's when the harassment started. It was the manager who brought us here. He knew I wasn't eligible for citizenship yet and tried to take advantage of that. I reported him. In hindsight, I should have had another job lined up. The business was shut down. The company wasn't willing to pay to bring home the workers, just the executives. We had to pay our way home. I couldn't afford it. My former manager offered to pay for my ticket if I... That's enough, Bruno said sadly. Jamie sighed with relief. Cully pulled her answer from Jamie's surface thoughts. Jamie was a straight male. Their manager wasn't. Cully decided to keep that bit of information to herself. We flirt with each other a lot, Cully said cautiously. I hope that's not going to be a problem, as long as it's not directed at me, Jamie said, and consensual, no? If you feel discomfort, tell us, Bruno said firmly. I will, Jamie said with obvious relief. I'm still hungry. More for you? Bruno said. Jamie had already demolished 2 bowls. Cully suspected they hadn't eaten for a while. Hey Bruno, ask where they get their noodles, Cully said. They both already knew the answer. Bruno nodded slowly, stood and thought, be kind, as he walked away from the table. A word of warning, just for the sake of full disclosure, Cully said while looking Jamie in the eye. I don't have full control over my tails. They act on their own sometimes, although they've been better behaved lately. If they start acting up, it's better to just keep clear. I have 2 of them tied up today, but that's not usually the case. Jamie nodded. That patted a cup, and the makeup you're using to add the illusion of cleavage tells me there's more to your story. I know you're actually male and straight. I'd imagine that has made it easier to get a free meal from men and women alike. I'll make sure you're housed and fed. That stops now, agreed. Jamie looked down and said nothing. The fury flowing from her was palpable. Well, Cully said. That's not why. Jamie glared. Then explain it to me, Cully demanded. It's really more complicated than that. Can we talk about this some other time? Okay, but I'm going to hold you to that. Kali motioned to Bruno surreptitiously with her black tail to let him know she was done with her chat. Section break. After they finished their meal, they called a car and headed back to the hotel to help Jamie get settled, which didn't take long. All they owned were the clothes on their back in their old communication unit. They chose a room on the lower 10 floors. Kali gave them her contact information with instructions to let her know when they were ready to talk. Kali headed up to the penthouse, dropped off her mask and grabbed the powder blue Cayman-style sweatsuit Ogeron had bought during Kali's day of carnage, and dropped it off for Jamie. Their clothes desperately needed to be washed, and the tail slit would only be a minor temporary inconvenience. She let Jamie know she was going to leave it by the door and told them where to find the laundry room. There was one at the end of the hallway every 4th floor. If it's only 1 floor up, would you mind showing me where I need to go? Jamie asked. Okay, come on, Kali said. They took the sweatsuit from Kali and followed her onto the elevator. Her left tail twitched as she pushed the button. What kind of boutique was it? Kali asked. Beauty products, mainly hair and skin care, mostly cosmetics and fragrances. You get the idea. The door opened onto the 4th floor. Kali led them down to the laundry room. They started carrying temporary fur dye for women with fur a few months before I transferred out here. I hear it's really taken off. Jamie sounded excited at first then frowned. The equipment is made for larger loads, but it works fine for smaller loads too, Kali said as she opened the door. Jamie walked inside, thanked her and started checking the washer settings. I'll be downstairs at the bar, Kali said. We're really the only ones here, Jamie said nervously. Ogeron's off on an assignment. Sato Cho said she'll be out late. Bruno's upstairs. That's pretty much it. Why? Kali asked. Jamie faltered as they thumbed the zipper on their hoodie. Just let me know when you're ready, Kali said, turning to leave. Wait, Jamie said urgently. If I don't do this now, I'm going to just keep putting it off. Just wait there, please. Kali didn't know what to make of their behavior, and their thoughts were too frantic to determine their intent. They closed over the door and changed into the sweatpants as fast as they could, so fast they put them on backwards with the narrow tail slot in the front. Okay, Jamie said, opening back up the door to one of the machines and tossing their pants in. I need to tell you that you were wrong about me. It's not just padding. They blushed brightly as they started to slowly pull down their zipper. The makeup makes me look fuller, but I am just shy of AB. Kali stared in confusion as their zipper continued its slow descent, stopping just above their navel. I don't just like women, Jamie said nervously. I've always been smaller and skinnier than the other boys. I always felt like I should have been born a girl. Which was confusing while I was growing up because I've never been attracted to guys. I started taking hormones which made my breasts start to develop. I started feeling right. Like this is the way I was always meant to be. But then there's that. Jamie motioned between their legs. I just couldn't do it, too much commitment, I guess. I felt incomplete for a long time. I went through multiple treatments to stabilize my testosterone production, but I just couldn't bring myself to take the final step and trade in my penis for a vagina. My former boss knew. He kept saying if I wanted to be a girl so much I should prove it by getting on my knees and, well, you know. I reported him when he told me I should bend over and get some practice. The asshole knew I wasn't attracted to men, so why couldn't he get it through his head that attraction has nothing to do with your sex? So you tell me, Jamie said through tear-filled eyes. What am I? I'm sorry, Kali said. I didn't understand. How could you? Jamie sobbed. It's my body and I don't even understand it. I should go, Kali said abruptly. Keep the sweatsuit. I'll leave instructions for Bruno to take you shopping after you've gotten some sleep. I can't have our new head of housekeeping looking like a pauper, can I? Wait, did you say I'm head of housekeeping? Jamie asked in surprise. Or the front desk clerk. We have plenty of jobs that need to be done. Take your pick. Kali smiled then turned back to the elevator. Bruno had just returned from the store and needed help getting everything inside. How is Damie? Bruno asked while giving her a sidelong look. Better. I'm going to head down to Flesh Row, Kali sighed. I need something. Can I help? Bruno grinned. I'm going to buy a prop for my tech mare. She wants me to sample the options. I don't suppose you have any recommendations. Not for that, Bruno chuckled softly. Liberation Day 6 horror. His fur was thickly matted in dense, sticky, matted blood. His leg had been crushed under a wall. The blue Terrans who worked for DEFCON did not have teeth that bite or claws that rend. They were not Karzan. They could not run as fast or jump as high. Their greatest weapon was in their skull, but breaking it open showed a lump of meat of little significant difference to that which resided within his own skull. He felt the wall shift, the bones in his legs grinding against one another under its weight. The muted sound of battle rang in his ears as dust drifted down on him from above. A dark mass blotted out the light. There's another one over here, a muted voice called out. Can he still fight? A second voice said, his legs pinned, the first voice said. Is it broken? The second voice asked. Looks like it, another voice said. Leave him, the first voice said. Wait, Hoaru wheezed. Tell the Kir I served well, but I won't be honoring him with a statue today. The wall began to shift. What's your name, Karzon? The first voice asked. Horu. He exhaled but lacked the breath to utter his clan name. Gauri. The loss of the Kachinas weighed heavily on her. Deploying the escape pod had crumpled the hull, causing the remnants to disintegrate. Her flight harness had been lost with the ship. She mourned the loss of the last vestiges of her wings while drifting for 2 days in that cramped one-person pod. There was no uplink, no way to contact anyone. She felt so alone and isolated. Her only hope was that this Grax person would keep their word and find her before her supplies ran out. At times, her undying love for Syntholo was the only thing that drove her onward. The proximity sensors emitted a warning. A ship was at long last pulling alongside her. A loud thump sounded within the pod. She tried to wait patiently, but she was excited. She knew she had to be careful not to hurt herself after being locked up in such a small place for 2 full days. Grax. They look like a bird, Juan said excitedly as they ran into the room. She's Sir Vani. They're an avian species. Make sure she's kept comfortable until we return to Epsilon Echelon. She will have much to do when she arrives. Gao Run has informed me she is to be our new technical consultant. Juan was capable for an E2. Hopefully she'd be as useful to the cause as they hoped. As he monitored the system scanners, he watched as the system defenses fired on a small vessel which was tumbling out of control toward planet Delta. Grax checked trajectory and transponder frequency. What was a Kaylani military yacht doing out here? Juan, contact Team 2. The government just fired on a ship en route to Delta. I want our people to get there first. And notify the training corps as well. Training corps, Juan said, but Akia's still recovering. I don't want any more surprises, Grax said. If she suspects the other Lamentic's involvement, warn Team 2. I will, Juan said, then ran off to the ship communications room. Syntholo. Samsarans were strictly herbivorous, E2 were omnivorous, Silshi were carnivorous. The leadership of the Echelon system hadn't properly accounted for the dietary needs of the Geladian population before bringing them to their home system. The population of over 10,000 E2 weren't getting adequate protein in their diet. They had brought over less than 2,000 Silshi without proper food stocks. They couldn't continue to survive off scraps from the arena. Syntholo had seen the fenced encampments. Many Silshi had resorted to eating their own tails. They'd eventually regenerate but cannibalizing their own people. It was horrible. He put out a call to the Gorgalian nation asking them to intervene, but a mobilization of that scale would be costly and proof was hard to come by. Right now, maintaining a small farm on Zeta Echelon and donating the eggs to a government official, with the promise it would be used to feed the Silshi, was the most he could do for them right now. He hadn't been able to locate Lady Darkseid's forces, but kept listening for rumors of errant ships. If he was to have any hope of liberating the Silshi, he'd need proof of what was being done to them. He could pass through the shadows, but recording devices were useless once he arrived. Their countermeasures were effective. If only he'd been permitted to keep his old communication unit before being sent into exile. After hearing rumors of a ship crash on Delta, he left the farm in the capable hands of his work crew and left to investigate further. The E2 were primitive, but a lack of technology should never be seen as a measure of a population's potential. It was the Black Church that discovered them first while pursuing a massive mystrium tumbling through space. A fellowship fleet which had been tracing the meteorite was beset by the Black Church fleet. The Black Church prevailed. They were first to land on the E2's moon, and forced its inhabitants to harvest the resources. A Kaylani scout and the pilots of a few crashed fellowship fighters helped guide the ancestors of Terran Arc 12 in their resistance against the invading aliens. Exposure to the exotic mineral had awakened knacks in the majority of the population. A startlingly high percentage of the population had a knack for cyberpathy, which caught the eye of Information Society officials. In time, the IS sent an expedition to relocate the cyberpathic portion of the population, in exchange for agreeing to keep the planet off star maps for the next 1,000 years, but the Black Church records remained. The Ashilar government purchased a map to the planet a few months ago and began forcibly relocating the population. The first few hundred came willingly after undergoing secretive training. The planet's inhabitants consisted of several species which had learned how to coexist and fight alongside each other as they drove out the Black Church years ago. Akiao, a former Black Church operative, had been hired to further their training in the mystic arts. Knack training for the E2 had gone well, until the local leadership started to suspect there was more to the E2 than they suspected. The Ashilar were an elusive race. Their species was younger than the Lamentics despite being considered of the same species age classification. The variance between elder races spans 500 million years. The only other remaining extant species of this classification were the gyrans, Jagaltim, and some Colmion breeds. Of all the species that once traversed the stars, only 5 elder races remained. The Kidalmamoshan and Cletharians were both ancient species that existed long before the Lamentix Elderoni predecessors. They say that Ashila used to visit Yaros, but those were all of the 6-armed variety which hasn't been seen for a few centuries. The modern 4-armed subbreed must have lost this capability along with an extra pair of arms. The precise start of their biological, cultural, and technological degradation was difficult to pinpoint. She was starting to suspect they'd actually been extinct for some time, but an unproven claim doesn't carry much weight. It would certainly explain why in all her years Akia had never met one. The E2 were a resourceful, adaptive people worthy of respect. They had only pretended to bend to the Ashilar yoke. Lady Darkseid was working behind the scenes as their benefactor, in a bid to conquer the system for the E2. It had progressed well until the local leadership hired a Lamentic mercenary to help them crush the will of the E2. Whether by luck, convenience, or in-depth research, they'd hired Akia's personal nemesis. It was only after she encouraged Grax to use the E2 to investigate her suspicions that the local government hired Belladonna. Either she or her old rival wanted to torment her further. Belladonna Orwell had contacted her to make arrangements to meet at Yaros to have a discussion. Akia was willing to meet her. Yaros was considered neutral ground. Lamentix don't kill Lamentix, but there was a lot of wiggle room in that. Orchestrating their demise was acceptable. Bella liked the sound of her own voice too much to plan a trap prior to indulging in a lengthy diatribe. If she were to set a trap, it would be for the return trip from Yaros. Akia's plans reflected this probability. Her brother was a useful monster. Their shared hatred was well known and occasionally useful. The local Yaros portal was in a dive bar in a major city on Echelon Beta. There had been 3 groups of E2 operatives until a few days ago. Now only 2 remained. She was in charge of the training corps, the members of which all possessed superior necks. She had stationed a few members of her team by the bar to keep an eye out for trouble, to compensate for the recent loss of her leech as a result of Bella's last attack against her team. Losing her leech had nearly cost her life and likely would have if her team hadn't taken out Bella's people so efficiently. Had her rival brought their guardian, things would have ended differently. Akia ignored Bella's platinum blonde guardian and the Lamentic keeping her company as she walked past the bar to the red curtain on the back wall. It was good to see her brother had already drawn the young woman's eye. It was just a matter of time before he used her to help Akia replenish her soul stone collection. There were few things Brad enjoyed more than torturing and brutally killing Terran women who were masquerading as Lamentix. After settling for blondes for so long, he jumped at the opportunity. Calling on him for help soured the sweet nectar of revenge. What happened to Samari was Belladonna's fault, not this naive girl. Akia passed beyond the curtain, beyond the illusory wall to Yaros. She looked around as she passed through the other side of the curtain. Yaros wasn't very busy. Phage Itar was sitting at a table for 2 having an intimate chat with Sinai Paris. Tauria Meta was seated at the bar having a drink with Lissa Rajuk. There were 3 Lamentic women she didn't recognize sitting at one of the larger tables with Sand the Botchally, who she only knew from being declared mediocre breeding stock by the Atom leadership. Her eyes locked with Belladonna, who was sitting alone at a table for 2 on the far side of the room. She was wearing a short, white, form-fitting dress, a red and black leather corset top and red thigh-high boots. It wasn't actually imperial red, and the choker she was wearing wasn't an actual soul catcher. Pia knew better. Bella always did enjoy putting on airs. She stepped up to the bar to get a drink before joining Bella at her table. I heard an interesting rumor. How about you? Yarrow said as he took her drink order. He always did love rumors, the more outlandish the better. Give and get, Ah smiled. I heard a rumor someone intercepted an Ashilar arms shipment the other day that wasn't weapons but actual false arms. Yarrow clapped his hands together. That's a good one. I'll have to give you back one just as fun. Yarrow poured her drink. I heard a rumor your little helper stopped by here with Oleander a few days back and returned with her new Lamentic daughter a few days later, he said with a broad grin. He always claimed all the best rumors contained a kernel of truth. The rumor she shared with him contained a lot more than a shred of truth. Judging from his rumor, Cyanide must have made use of the vessel she provided for her. Her Samari was dead, but at least her body wasn't going to waste. The Lamentic child bit was ridiculous but amusing. Akia grabbed her drink and headed to the table. She set down her drink and sat across from Belladonna. Aha Ilaru, Bella said with venomous cordiality. Belladonna Orwell, Aha responded with a forced smile. The tension in the air between them was so thick it was nearly perceptible. Shame about your leech, Bella said with cruel delight, and so soon after you lost your defender. You should really keep closer watch over what you claim is yours. I'm sure my half-brother Oleander will be saddened by both losses. You'll have to tell him all about it at the next Grand Gala. I won't be attending the Grand Gala, Ah said dismissively. I'm giving my spot to my little sister Leliani. Strange that I've lost interest in Oleander since the death of my leech. I'm starting to think they weren't properly lobotomized. I'd be happy to make sure your lobotomy is complete. Bella failed to mask her glare. Oh silly me. I meant your leech's lobotomy of course. I didn't mean to imply you have no will of your own. Ah smiled. I'm sure a mercenary like you acts of your own volition all the time. Really? Meek little Leliani? That's a poor bluff. She's poor stock. I was surprised Noor was willing to let you attend. The Alara gene pool must be running dry, but then again she wouldn't dare go herself, not after birthing a disgrace like Brad. I forget. Isn't he your brother? Bella grinned viciously. Watch it Bella, your fangs are showing, Ah taunted. I'm hoping this isn't because of the poor choices that cowardice led you to make recently. You were using the carbon copy mistrionic ability concurrently with a psionic clone. It must be taxing. Certainly explains why you seem so much weaker. I wonder where you really were at the time. That's the difference between you and me. I really was there while you were hiding away somewhere and your guardian kept your real body safe. At least I won't have to worry about that happening again. Bella looked troubled. I hear Samari's doing well on her own. I heard she has a child now. Yet another miscalculation. You're not very good at this, are you? You still have the advantage. You still have a leech, but then again I have plenty of soul stones. Thanks for the contribution by the way. What knacks did your defender have? I don't want to have to wait for Brad to finish with Janice to find out. You're bluffing again. You've always hated Brad, Belladonna said in an icy tone. Do I sound like I'm bluffing? Bella cackled. Sure, I hate him, but we're still family. Bella looked back and forth between her and the exit. Oh, don't bother, I taunted. Janice's soul is leech food by now and her body's kibble. So what did you call me here to discuss? I just shot down your reinforcements, Bella growled as she got up from the table. You're not getting help from the Elvrin system. Elvrin? Akia said with genuine surprise. I don't know anyone in that system. Are you sure it wasn't another shipload of Jaladians? Akia smiled as Bella hurried to the exit, while trying to look like she wasn't running. I wonder who she just shot down, Ah mused as she got up and sauntered toward the curtain. I'll have to look into that.